Hey guys, how are you today? We are going to go over Peter's 5th place King Vegeta deck profile. Peter, how are you? Uh, and congratulations on your incredible placing.
Thank you, man. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me here. It's been pretty good. I'm still buzzing. I know it's been a week, but yeah, it's all right.
Yes,
Uh,
indeed. It is a splendid experience topping. Let's just get right into the list. So we are running King Vegeta, which means we have the King Vegeta leader. So King Vegeta, when this card is placed in your leader area, you get to activate one Young Invaders from your deck, which is the field card. Auto, when this card attacks, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, add up to one mono red Saiyan with an energy cost of 5 or less among them, and add them to your hand. And then your Awaken is when your opponent's life is at 4 or less. When you or your opponents, so it's not just your opponents, but you may draw one, switch up to one of your energy to active mode, and add cards from your life to your hand until you have 5 life left. Then on the Awaken side, you reduce the combo cost of all red Saiyans with 500 power in your hand by 1. When this card attacks, draw one card and auto once per turn. When the power of one of your opponent's cards is decreased, choose one of your opponent's battle cards and gets neg 10k for the turn. So Peter, why did we choose the King Vegeta deck?
well, partly it's just I am a fan of the anime, and while King Vegeta doesn't see much in the series, in fact, he doesn't really do much at all other than attempt to attack Frieza and die. Uh, he I have a sort of soft spot for him, and when they announced the new King Vegeta that had this cute little mechanic where you were playing tiny little baby invaders to your opponent's board for negative effects, I thought, yeah, that just sounds a lot of fun. I'm all in it. I just wanted to go for it. Um, I liked the negging effect as well. I like his ability to control his him being able to take his own life thanks to young invaders. I tend to favor self-awakening leaders where possible. But just all in all, I just thought the archetype was gimmicky and fun, and I wanted to see what I could do with it.
That is fair enough. It is definitely a fun, enjoyable deck, and especially with the list you've got. So let's get right into some of the spice. So we've got your Young Invader package. So of course you've got the Young Invader field, where if your leader is a King Vegeta BR, at the start of your opponent's turn, play one red Saiyan card with 500 power from your deck to your opponent's battle area. Shuffle your deck. If you played a card, you can't play battle cards that aren't red Saiyan cards for the turn. Then you activate main once per turn, add one card from your life to your hand, then play up to one red Saiyan with 500 power from your deck in rest mode with its skills negated for the game, and then another activate main for one red, choose one of your opponent's battle cards, gets neg 5000 power. Then we've got the Vegeta Young Invader. When this card is played, if your opponent's life is at 5 or more, crit them a life, then draw a card, and then auto once per turn. When one of your cards is attacked, choose that card and it gets neg 5k power for the turn. And then probably the ultimate spice, we do have the SSB Vegeta Technique Unchained, where you can pay 1, choose one of your skillless Vegeta BR cards with the original energy cost of 1 in your battle area, return it to its owner's hand, then you get to play this card from your hand and you get 10k power for the turn, and then activate main, return it to your hand. So a couple interesting things here. This is the only Young Invader you run, Peter. Why did you go for only the Vegeta Young Invader?
Well, in an initial list, I did used to run Son Goku Hope of the Saiyans as well. In part because prior to running SSB Vegeta Technique Unchained, I used to run the Goku Technique Unchained, largely because Goku Hope of the Saiyans actually maintains combo power in your hand and it doesn't need energy to combo with him prior to your awakening. So it was an easy way to put down pressure. But then Bandai released a ruling clarifying that Son Goku Hope of the Saiyans automatically returns to active mode at the start of your opponent's turn, even on the turn you play him, because his auto to switch into rest mode happens before turn processing switches him to active mode, which kind of made the card useless and literally just free value for your opponent. At that point, I decided to take him out. It was also because I had one bad matchup in another game where at that point I was only running 3 of the Vegetas and all 3 of them were in my life, and I promptly lost that game. and decided from that point that consistency was more important, and swapped out the Vegeta package completely. And because I'm not playing the Goku and I'm not playing the Broly, there's little value in having Raditz other than the fact that he isn't unique. So just the consistency of Vegeta is the reason I go with him.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And then where did we come up with this SSB Vegeta spice?
Okay, well, as I said, I used to run the Goku, which does literally the same thing. It's just he only bounces off of the Goku instead of the Vegeta.
Yeah.
And it was before I owned any copies of Vegeta switching gears. So I needed a way to increase my hand size kind of quickly, because while the deck does do a bit of drawing, it doesn't really do enough drawing to put down a lot of pressure in the, say, the first 2-3 turns. So when I saw this card and I kind of clued into the fact that Young Invaders was playing them skillless, I realized, well, for 1 red energy, I'm essentially gaining a life, so that's 1 card. I'm gaining a Baby Saiyan, that's another card. I get board presence with a 20k swing. And then I can return him back to my hand so he can again be combo power later. I just realized that the combo was really quite absurd. And while I don't tend to use it a lot in the early game, it's just a very easy way of maintaining pressure constantly, especially as you can use switching gears later to bottom deck a Young Invader and then repeat the process again in another turn. Or alternatively, you can use your super combos to do exactly the same thing. Yeah, Technique Unchained, even though I now do have copies of Switching Gears, it has proved to be a very strong combo that a lot of people don't expect, and even a turn 2, turn 3 20k still has a reasonable amount of pressure that your opponent has to answer. So I've just kind of stuck with it, and I enjoy him in the deck very much. He's probably not leaving anytime soon.
That's fair enough. He's a very good card. Moving on to the rest of your Vegeta chain, you have 3 SS Vegeta switching gears, which is the TP promo. So choose 1 Raditz or Vegeta BR card with an original energy cost of 500 power. Place it at the bottom of its owner's deck. If you do, you get to play Vegeta switching gears, where on play you bottom deck a card for hand, then draw 2, and then you have SS God Vegeta to the next level, which has the same activate main, except you can do as many times as you want, and it costs 1 red. And then it's auto when you play. You get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, add 1 red Saiyan card with an energy cost of 5 or less, or 1 red Unison with a specified cost of 1 among them to your hand, and shuffle your deck. This Vegeta is critical and has unique. And then finally we've got SSB Vegeta at full power. This is your semi-boss monster, I'd say, for the deck. X evolve for 3, you get to draw 1 on top of a Vegeta with an energy cost of 3. This card can't be played from any areas with non-evolved skills. And then if this card is in rest mode, when one of your opponent's battle card is played or attacked, you may choose that card and give it 10k power for the turn. And then when this card is removed from the battle area by an opponent's skill, place 1 card from your opponent's life in their drop area. A lot of text on these Vegetas, but walk me through your ratios on this chain.
We'll start off with SSG Vegeta to the next level. He's a 4-of, as he's quite important to the engine. He puts down a ridiculous amount of pressure early on while essentially costing 0 resources other than 1 energy, because he automatically replaces himself. On top of that, he kind of gets our whole engine started. That's part of the reason why he's a 4S, because I'm not going to say I need to see him in my first hand, but it is very, very ideal that I do. Often the way I will start the game is, particularly if I'm going second, I'll start the game by giving my opponent a Vegeta the Young Invader, and then I'll start off my turn by taking a life to find my own Vegeta the Young Invader, and then I'll immediately drop it into SSG Vegeta, and then go ahead and swing. Due to the fact that SSG is already a 19k, and then my opponent's Young Invader is negging them 5k, they will almost, I would say, in 9 out of 10 games, they will simply accept the critical damage rather than give up the 3 cards from hand it would cost them to combo out. And that allows me to get out Bardock the Resolute, which we'll talk about later, which starts my entire game package. Switching Gears is an excellent card. It allows you to do a lot of filter. If it's in my first hand, I'm more than happy to leave it there. If I have more than one in my first hand, I usually won't keep all of them. But he's just an excellent way to filter through some of the cards in this deck. He doesn't strictly give you more cards. Really, he just gives you a free 10k body that replaces himself. But the filter is what's important about him. He has at times also been a sudden free body to evolve SSB Vegeta at full power on top of. But generally, he's just there for the filter and free value. He's also there to place an extra body on the field for the sake of Tau, which we'll talk about later as well. And lastly, we have SSB Vegeta at full power. He is a great boss monster, but I actually don't use him very much at all. Often I leave him there more. I'll charge one in my energy when I can, just to simply remind people of the threat of him, but I might not necessarily use him. There's only certain matchups I will use him, and only explicitly when I know my opponent has no ability to steal him off me. As I'm sure most people are aware, if my opponent gets to gain control of him through some means, when his auto goes off, it will instead crit me instead of my opponent. But for many games, he tends to be unnecessary. I could conceivably take him out and it have no difference, but generally I like having him there for access. There have been one or two games where simply having him in play has won me the game because my opponent has had no means to sufficiently get past him or to sufficiently damage me without him. In the mirror match, he's particularly important just because he stops a lot of your opponent's plays as well. But yeah, generally, I like these ratios. Just they help for my particular playstyle for the consistency I need.
Yeah, definitely very consistent and get you the right pieces, and it's also just a lot of pressure. It's really, really nice. One great thing about King Vegeta. Moving on to your free play battle cards, we have 2 SS Goku One Hit Wonder, when you can play this card for free if the power of one of your opponent's battle cards is decreased. You've got Bardock the Resolute, which is a double strike which restands when your opponent activates a counter once per turn, and you can free play this when your opponent adds a card to their hand via a skill, or a card from their life is placed in their drop area. And then you got Mercenary Tower, which can be played if you have 3 or more non-token battle cards in play, and it gains critical for the turn. So go for it. Talk me through your free play battle cards.
Okay. Well, I'll talk about Bardock and Mercenary Tower first. They're at 3 because neither of them are mono red Saiyans. As a result, finding them in the early game is a bit tricky. So you ideally want, if possible, one of each in your starting hand. That doesn't always happen, but it's definitely better when it does. The reason we want them in the starting hand, as I mentioned earlier, we like to start the game by using SSG Vegeta to deal critical damage, and then that will then bring out Bardock the Resolute. Often, immediately after that, before I've even done anything with Bardock, my next stage will be to use a Switching Gears to then replace my opponent's Young Invader, to then place a third body on the board, and then I'll use that to play Tau, hitting my opponent for 2 criticals right off the bat. After that, once they are down to 5 life, I will then try to hit them with Bardock just to try and get them down to 3. If they're a leader that awakens by untapping energy, I'll then continue to pressure them with SSG. With Switching Gears, and I'll even awaken myself just so I can put more pressure and start replenishing my hand against them. Because they're on less than 4 life at that point. That's why I like to awaken. It leaves my energy up, and then I can immediately defend my board with King Vegeta's Imposing Presence. SS3 Goku is one of those cards that, again, doesn't get played every game. Often, I like to simply combo him away at an earlier stage with my opponent not necessarily keeping track of when it happens, and then at a later point in the game, I'll use his Activate Battle from drop when when someone doesn't realize it's a thing I can do. Um, but at the same time, I also really like him for those matchups when people start the game by playing a Dark Power Black Mask Saiyan, because it means I'm not limited to doing nothing on my first turn. I can still spend 1 red with Young Invaders to remove their Black Mask Saiyan, and then off of that immediately play Goku and still deal and put down some kind of pressure. But yeah, he's only a 2-off because he isn't Mono Red Saiyan, so he's found by all of our search abilities, whereas Bardock and Tau both, neither of them can be found that way. If I find extra copies later, then they can simply be put back with either super combos or switching gears, which is just goes to talk about the value of switching gears in the deck. But yeah, so as Bardock and Tau are the main package, and Goku is he's nice when he goes off, but if he doesn't, it's definitely no skin off our nose.
Yeah, the Goku is very good. I completely forgot it was an activate battle, not activate main. With your leader effect, that can be neg 15k on a battle card they just comboed a bunch into, which can quite easily kill it, which is really nasty. Moving on to some more of the red Saiyans which are searchable via your leader. We have 2 Broly Crown of Retribution. If your leader is red, when you play this card from your hand, if your opponent has 2 or more energy in active mode, your opponent reveals their hand and you can choose up to 1 battle card from it with 20,000 power or less and place it in your opponent's drop. You have Chain Attack Bardock, which has Bond 3. They have to be red Saiyan or Bardock Screw cards, but then this card gains 11k power and crit. When this attacks, choose one of your opponent's battle cards, give it neg 4k power for each red Saiyan and or Bardock Screw card in your battle area. Finally, we have Vegeta Royal Evolution. Auto for 1 red if your opponent has 3 or more energy, and it's your turn at the end of the battle in which this card is used in your combo. From your hand, switch up to 1 mono red leader to active mode and it gains 5k power for the turn. And its keyword skills negated and it can't activate non-keyword skills for the turn. Then finally, we have its Activate Battle, which is similar to the Activate Battle of the Goku we just saw. However, it is from hand and it negs 10 one of your opponent's battle cards. Once again, a lot of text as a lot of cards in your deck, but go for it. Why were we running these searchable tech cards?
Okay, well, Broly Crown of Retribution almost speaks for itself. In a best of 1 setting, he is fantastic, almost mandatory. Obviously, all of these are mono red Saiyans, so they can be easily found. Not so much Chain Attack Bardock because I only have a single copy. But Broly Crown is magnificent if your opponent untaps to leave them and to leave themselves some defense to actually do the attack. It's the first thing I do. Just so I can peek, even if they don't have any negates, if I can just knock something out of their hand so they have 1 less card in hand to deal with me, then he has, in my opinion, done what he needs to do. Often, if I'm playing against a leader that I know will untap too, I'll just pressure them until they awaken, and then immediately use him. It's just a way to keep your opponent guessing and to kind of hit them from as many angles as possible. Chain Attack Bardock is a fantastic card in this deck. Getting out 3 red Saiyans, including himself, is a very simple thing to do in this deck. On top of that, he has critical, so he is yet another enabler to play Bardock the Resolute. And then finally, whenever he attacks, he can neg one of your opponent's battle cards 4,000 power per red Saiyan / Bardock's crew you have in play, which means when you get him out, at the very least, he's going to be minus 12. If you're awakened at the time you get him out, which generally, if this game plan is going well, you usually will be, that's going to be minus 12 and then another minus 10 to something, or even to the same thing. And Vegeta Royal Evolution, he was in my initial build of this, and he's a card that I always wanted to be good. But at the time he came out, there wasn't a lot of decks that could really capitalize on him particularly well. And then once we released King Vegeta, who could not only search for him, but also double use his Activate Battle, essentially, I found that it was the deck that was perfect for him. The Activate Battle ability of spending 1 red and pitching from your hand to neg 10, and then potentially another neg 10 in the middle of battle, is just quite crazy and has saved me quite a few games, especially when someone just drops a fighting against fate, assuming that that will win them the game. But weirdly enough, the order does come up more often than you would expect. Your opponent getting to 3, and then you getting to 3. If you drop this when you have a board, when you already have a reasonably established board, which is pretty easy to keep safe in this deck, it just provides almost too much pressure, because for 1 red energy and 1 card from your hand, you're essentially turning your leader into a 20k dual attack for the turn. I know a lot of people are kind of leery about the card because it does negate your non-keyword skills and negates all your orders, etc. But that doesn't really matter if you've already attacked with your leader once and gotten your draw. Generally, I'm not going to say it depends on Vegeta Royal Evolution, but I do feel a lot safer when he is in my hand. Chain Attack, we can take or leave, but I do only own the 1 copy. And Broly Crown, I like to resolve at least 1 each game. If I resolve both, I feel almost invincible. It's an amazing card.
Fair enough. Quite good cards. And then we have a couple more tech options in our red Saiyans, and just another Saiyan. I've got KO Ken, SSB KO Ken, Concentrated Destruction. When you play this card from your hand, choose all your opponent's battle cards with 20k power less to KO them. Activate main as your leader is red, and you place this card from your hand in your drop. Choose one of your opponent's battle cards. Ignoring Barrier gets negative 25k power for the turn. Intensify Empowering Trunks. When it attacks, you can take a life and it gets 10k in crit. And finally, Fighting Against Fate is a 25k dual attacker for free. Why do we have these ratios? Go for it.
I'll start off with Intensifying Power Trunks. It is simply another critical enabler. Again, to play Bardock the Resolute. He is also a very relevant attacker at 15k critical. And also, because our Awaken condition, if you awaken early due to your opponent being on 4, doesn't actually get us to 4, he's also just a great way to turn on our super combos immediately after the fact. Admittedly, he's sort of there as a pseudo replacement to Chain Attack Bardock, but in actual testing, I could easily see myself keeping him or even replacing Chain Attack Bardock with him, just because this is sort of a lower to the ground version and we're not running the Bardock that evolves on top of Chain Attack. And I do value the ability to take my own life at times. Kaioken Son Goku Concentrated Destruction, if I'm honest, is exclusively there for his Activate main. I have not once spent the 3 energy to play him and wipe an opponent's board. It's never come up. King Vegeta is very, very good at removing things, even without him, so that part's irrelevant. But the ability to neg something 25k ignoring Barrier is not something that he has ready access to, and it has won me many games, particularly in the Mecha Frieza matchup, where they can often be somewhat dependent on Aegis Bojack to protect their board. If they tap out and you use this to remove it, that's often just game, because they don't have any way of then opening their energy, and often their hand is full of extra cards and 1+10Ks. I did originally get it for the Sin Shenron matchup because of the 8-drop Allies Absorbed, since he often becomes a 30k barrier blocker. This obviously doesn't remove him by itself, sadly. But usually once he's a 5k, your opponent is fairly leery about the idea of actually blocking with them. Other than that, there are some games and some matchups where he simply gets charged, and I have no need for it. Fighting Against Fate is he's just a great finisher. Unfortunately, he's a finisher that most players expect to deal with. He's very popular in many, many decks. In fact, there's very few decks in the game that can't run him at all. And yeah, he just provides a ridiculous amount of pressure. He costs 0 energy when he's providing that pressure. And even if I just throw him down and combo nothing, it's either going to cost my opponent 3 cards out of hand each swing, or a super combo and another card out of hand each swing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have been known to throw them down, even when I'm nowhere near actually winning game, just to put my opponent back. And if it doesn't put them back, it still puts me forward. I don't really mind. But I don't need to see him every game, which is why it's just there as a one-off.
Yeah, he is a very good card when you see him. Wins a lot of games and puts a lot of pressure on. Sometimes I even drop fighting against Fate just to get rid of 2 battle cards on the opposing field. Because it's pretty hard for people to combat out of 2 25k swings.
Exactly.
Moving on to your Unisons plus negates. So we have Black Marseille Brawler from Another Dimension. When your opponent adds a card from their life to their hand or places a card from their life in their drop, add a marker to this card, and if it's your turn, this card gets 5k power for the turn. Then it's got another auto. When your opponent plays a battle card, your opponent may choose that card, give it neg 5k power for the turn. If they don't, add 2 markers to this card. And finally, it's -4. This card gains 15k power and double strike for the turn. And then to pair with the Unison, we have Yamcha Merciless Barrage, where if your Unison has 2 or more markers on it, you can activate Yamcha's counter skill for free. And the counterplay skill reads, you can't activate counterplay skills of other cards for the turn. Choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards. They get neg 15. Choose up to 2 of your opponent's battle cards. They get neg 15k for the turn. Then play this card. And finally, we have King Vegeta's Imposing Presence, where if your leader is a mono red Saiyan, you may choose the attacking card, ignoring barrier, give it neg 10k power for the turn. Then your opponent can't attack unless they give the attacking card -5k power for the turn each time they attack. Note how it says give, which means it does ignore barrier. So why do we have these ratios? It's a pretty unique one, running the Black Marseille in the deck. We've seen Piccolo Unisons, we've seen Jiren. Why do we have the Black Marseille?
I know it's weirdly funny and strange to actually be running the Unison that was made to go with the engine.
Right.
It shouldn't be strange, but it is, and I completely get it. Jiren is an atrocious monster if you have him in this deck, and King Piccolo just provides. Sorry, not King Piccolo. Piccolo Junior just provides a ridiculous amount of value, simply by drawing and constantly wiping your opponent's board. I went with Black Marseille, in part because I do not own any Piccolos, but also because this is a fairly low to the ground aggro version. He is of only 1 energy, of course. His requirement for gaining markers is to deal damage, which is something that happens in this deck a lot. Even if you play him on your first turn and you play a Young Invader to your opponent's side of the field on their turn, he's already at 2 markers. If your opponent doesn't swing into him immediately, you have Merciless Barrage live to deal with the first thing that they put out. And if they try and play if they can't play a battle card that has at least 15k power on their first turn, then that means they have to lose cards to actually deal with him. If they choose to ignore him, that's fine, because then it's just going to be free value for you for the remainder of the game. Once he starts gaining markers, it's almost impossible to actually put him away. In addition, with Merciless Barrage, something that's not particularly well known, about Merciless Barrage, but specifically the combo Merciless Barrage with Brawler from Another Dimension. Once you get to 2 markers, if your opponent has played something and you use Merciless Barrage for free, and it is something that's 15k and capable of being removed by Merciless Barrage immediately, you can still trigger Black Marseille's auto even though that battle card is no longer there. And because of it, your opponent is unable to meet the requirement of giving it -5k, and as a result, you will just automatically gain 2 markers. It's a great way to put a lot of pressure early, and even if you never get to use the activate main of Black Marseille, which, if I'm honest, a lot of people tend to just save you negates, it is a ridiculously huge window when you go, oh, hey, he's now a 25k double striker. But it's still an invitation to get a negate out of your opponent's hand. Really, he's just there to be constant pressure as a threat, but he doesn't get played in every game, which is why we only have him as 3 of. It's the same reason for Yamcha, why we only have 3 of him as well. as I mentioned, if we're playing against any deck that has the ability to play a battle card with 15k or more power on their first turn that can also attack, they can also very easily remove the Unison, so he doesn't tend to get used in every game. And then lastly, we have King Vegeta's Imposing Presence. It's a ridiculously good negate. It seems good on paper when you read it, and it's even worse in practice. As I mentioned earlier, often I will try to get my opponent down to 4 life on my first turn, or on my second turn if I've gone first. After that point, I will almost always awaken and leave 1 energy open just to use King Vegeta's Imposing Presence, because doing so means it's nearly impossible for my opponent to actually address the board that I've already placed in play. And it also then threatens any battle card they may choose to play on their next turn, because my leader order will then trigger if they attack with anything. But yeah, it's a pretty important negate to see. We usually, if I can get one in my first hand, I'll usually keep it, depending on what else I've seen. And yeah, if you have one in hand, you just kind of, you feel very safe. It only costs 1 energy, and the ability to use it for free when you're on a 3 is just wonderful. Lastly, one thing worth addressing with Yamcha Merciless Barrage again is, just because of our leader's order of giving an additional -10 when you neg something on your turn, he is arguably, and very situationally, still worth playing for his hard cast cost of 3, even if you don't have a Unison in play. It's been rare that it's come up, but there have been times when I've used it to save myself. I did have one game once where someone dropped a Food Shrouded Mystery, and I still responded to it with Yamcha Merciless Barrage because I was allowed to, because the counterplay window is before his auto actually goes off. And because Food Shrouded Mystery doesn't stop leader skills, my -10 still went off, so it just reduced him down to a 5k double strike. I proceeded to lose the game the turn after that because I couldn't activate any other skills, but I did stay alive for that turn. Yeah, but that's the rough reason behind those ratios.
It is fair enough indeed. And then we've got some bigger combo cards. We have 2 Double Strike Kais and 2 Frieza's Death Ball. Frieza's Death Ball is essentially a 25k combo power when not being used on a Unison or against a Unison. So yeah, let's just... Why do we have 2 of each of these guys?
Alright, well, the deck has a substantial amount of draw and filter. So 2 is sort of the magic number we need to relatively see it, but not see it too many times in our hand, because we're pretty low to the ground. So 1 energy is, weirdly enough, still a lot. But we do definitely want to see at least 1 of these each game. If we can see 1 of each of them, that's fantastic. If you can see 2 Frieza's Death Balls and a Hidden Power Ace Supreme Kai, there's almost nothing that can stop your attack unless your opponent has 500,000 cards in hand. Yeah. They're just fantastic cards. In addition, if you go first, Hidden Power is pretty nice to have in your starting hand. I did have a game where, and another one recently, where I ended up playing SSG on my first turn, and then on my second turn, I swung with it. My opponent didn't negate. My opponent was at -5 because of their baby Vegeta that I played to their side of the field. And then I just went ahead and gave him double strike, and they're not going to do anything about a 29k double strike critical against when they're on 5k power. No. It's very, very rude, and it's how you lose friends, but it's not something anyone can really do anything about. But yeah, those are the right ratios I found, so that you find them, but they're not obscenely in your hand all the time.
Yeah, definitely good ratios we've got there. And then we have our super combos. So we have 3 Raditz, which is if your life's at 4 or less, you can bottom deck a card and draw 2, and then it's a 10k combo. And then we have 1 Whis, which is essentially Frieza's Death Ball, but in a super combo. So if your leader is red or yellow, when you combo with this card from your hand, choose one of your opponent's battle cards and gets neg 10k for the turn. Why did we go for a 3-1 split and not just like a 4-0 down the line, considering Raditz is searchable and Whis is not?
It's sort of left over from an original version I made of the deck, which was before I actually owned any copies of Raditz at all. Originally, I was using the Bulma super combo that can play a one-drop Earthling.
Oh.
And I was using it in combination with, I can't remember her name. It's a one-drop Pan who gives your leader or a battle card 5k, and when you combo with her from play, you can draw a card,
Yeah.
which allowed me to go very heavily in when I wanted to go for game because I would generate so much value off of just this combination of super combo and card. But even back then, I was running it as a 3-1 split with Least. I did finally get my copies of Reddits, but I still found the value of Whis to be just just overwhelming when you actually have it and when you need it. A lot of players do tend to think that they're safe going in when you are tapped out, and to be fair, that's generally the case. But if you have Waste in hand, you can still feel pretty safe about it because he's going to still, thanks to your leader effect, neg something 20k in the middle of battle, which is a big enough swing to kill most things. And even if it doesn't kill something, that's still 30k power difference between you and your opponent for one card. Uh,
Right.
yeah, he's just good. I like having him as a one-off. I don't get to see him every game, but when I do, you just feel safe.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Definitely one card 30k combo power because your leader is pretty nasty.
Yeah.
And then let's move on to your matchups. Oh, just one other quick thing to note. You didn't have a secret rare.
Yeah. Well, because the deck has a lot of filter and a lot of draw, I wanted to keep it more tuned so that I can relatively see what I need to in each game. Um, I know I've probably said the word filter at least 8 times in this interview, but we have a few cards that can't be comboed. We have some negates, we have some 0Ks, we have some unisons, and I didn't want to add more to that than need be. Well, we don't have too many, but it's just nice to have that control and flow of what's in our deck. And because we get to search our deck every turn, we have a fairly good idea of what's actually in there. So yeah, I could have run a heroine's lineage. I do have one, but I feel like most people play around it, and usually I want to leave my energy open for something else, like either a death ball or a royal evolution to knock something out, or a negate, or something along those lines. Um, it's not strictly necessary. If I get a copy, I probably wouldn't mind running the new red secret rare that was revealed, the next set, the very pretty one. I don't think it's the best card
The
or the
very,
best
very
secret
pretty
rare
one.
by any means, but it looks amazing, and I'm having hard saying no to it. I'm having a hard time saying no to it.
That is fair
Uh,
enough. It is very,
yeah,
very purty of a card. Right.
yeah.
Now, quickly moving on to the matchups you had. So, round one, you had Margin Vegeta, which you ended up with the W. How'd that one go?
Well, it helps that prior to running King Vegeta, I actually was running Martian Vegeta for the previous 3 regionals. No, 2 regionals I entered before it.
Yep.
So I've had a lot of experience with the deck. I was very well aware of how it runs. I ended up going first. I played my Unison first turn. I was well aware that he could remove it, but I wanted to coax him into removing it instead of hitting me, which thankfully he did. He then proceeded to play his ball. I hit him for. I got to get most of my chain off. I hit him for a couple of criticals, got him down to 3 or 2 life by my second turn, which thankfully also destabilized his deck a lot by putting a lot of cards underneath ball that he didn't necessarily need.
Yeah.
And I left 1 NG up for King Vegeta's Imposing Presence. I then just waited and allowed him to do everything he needed to do to damage me until he got out Boom. He was only able to find the one with Deflect. That's a 20k. He ended up swinging with it. I then nuked it with Vegeta's Imposing Presence and then my leader auto so that he couldn't continue to go up the chain.
Nasty.
And at that point, it was back to my turn. He didn't really have that many cards left in hand, and I had way too much board presence. So yeah, it was not a matchup I was expecting to go into, but I guess I probably should have thought more about it, given that the ban list had just come out, and I'm sure there was a lot of people who wanted a last hip hurrah with it before
Yeah.
the ball gets reduced to a turn 3 play. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and my opponent Daniel was a really great guy. Had a lot of fun talking with him, and a lot of fun doing shop about the deck afterwards. But yeah.
Fair enough. Then round two, you had the King Vegeta mirror. Anything fancy of note in that one, or is it just a relatively interesting matchup because mirrors always are?
Yeah, the King Vegeta matchup is well, I wouldn't say it's grindy, but I don't think that I know of a single mirror match that is not grindy.
Yeah.
Um, except maybe Martian Vegeta, that's a lot of fun. Anyway, King Vegeta matchup, mirror match, is interesting because neither of you will ever be willing to play a young invader to your opponent's side because all they will do is immediately gain free value of it.
Yeah.
So it slows down the game quite dramatically. And it's just about playing resources to your side as often as you can, and trying to maximize on each interaction that you do. Um, so generally, we'll try not to hit our opponent unless it's for critical or unless to force an awaken, um, or if it's going to get us a draw. And it was a pretty slow match. Uh, Thankfully, I was able to provide enough pressure. I think we ended up going until turn 3 or turn 4. That was against Ryan Aquilino, who is quite a good player as well. The last regionals I went to, he was also playing King Vegeta and came third. Um, but ultimately, I was able to. I think he wasn't particularly familiar with the version that I play, which, to be fair, a lot of people aren't. Um, and I was able to maintain my resources pretty well and gain more value out of my interactions than he was in his standard deck. And yeah, ultimately, I just had more cards in hand, and that's how I got the win.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Then round three, you had a loss to Soul Striker. How's
Yeah, that was a really hard one and a little soul crushing. But my opponent Umberto was a really nice guy and um, really had a lot of fun in that matchup. He was the sort of type of person who would keep me coming back to play games. But yeah, he had a Soul Striker deck that had a ridiculous amount of draw. He was running yellow draw apes. He was running the one drop combo Sun Goku, who draws a card. He's a 1+10k when you combo him, and he draws a card when you do so. I can't quite remember his name right now. He had a lot of defense in his deck. And on top of that, he was also running Supreme Kai of Time counterplay, that it costs 1 energy. When you play it, your opponent can't attack with battle cards with costs of 2 or less.
Ooh.
And he hit me with that 2 turns in a row in the early game, which stopped. It didn't stop all of my interactions, but it did stop me from attacking with Tau. It stopped me from attacking with some intensifying Trunks and also a chain attack Bardock.
Yep.
And by let's see, he'd had his second turn. I had my second turn, and I started it off by using a Broly Crown. And I looked at his hand. I found he had a his Hatchak Secret Rare. He had the Frieza at 100%. He had Rebirth of Justice. He had 2 God Ceilings. And a baby Golden Avenger, and as well as that, 2 super combos. And at that point, I kind of realized that I wasn't going to get over this hump that was there. He did an excellent job of defending himself. On his turn 3, he dropped the baby Unison and just kept plussing off of that, and I just couldn't get through to really do any meaningful damage. Eventually, turn 6, he played Fu Shrouded and Mystery. I attempted to counter with Merciless Barrage, and he followed it up with a Baby Ape. I out-comboed it out of his Fu, but then I definitely couldn't out-combo out of his leader also being a 25k, or his triple striking Ape. And yeah, over there. He was really strong. I'm very happy for him. And he came third, so I can't feel too bad about losing to someone who ranks that highly. But yeah.
Alright, and then round 4, you had the OG Broly Hand Destruction matchup. How'd this one go?
That was against Michael Ozwiki, a friend of mine. He goes to Cardtastic Collectibles and Gaming as well. I am already fairly acquainted with his playstyle. He really knows how to play hand destruction. He was born to play hand destruction, I would almost say. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't hit you for any kind of damage unless it's going to cost you a card out of hand.
Yeah.
And this is actually one of those matchups for why I like running SSB Vegeta Technique Unchained. It's simply a way of keeping my hand flush as they continue to try and go at me. As a result, he was never really able to meaningfully put my hand down. I think the entire game I was never at, well, after the first one or two turns, I was never at anything less than about 8 cards in hand. Eventually, on about his turn 4, he tried going all in with a double strike, and I outcomboed him, and at that point, he just kind of called it because he realized that my snapback was going to be a bit too hard for him. But yeah, it was. He ended up doing quite well on the day as well. I wouldn't say he came top 20.
Not bad.
Yeah.
And then round 5, you had Soul Striker, which was a big W for you. How'd that one go?
Yeah, this was, I want to say it was against James Brewer. Yeah, it was against him. Really nice guy as well. He was playing Soul Striker, not quite the same as Umberto was. It was a variant running that was using Son Goku Nimbus Master to use skillless 2-drops as a means of playing the latest 10-drop Gohan.
Yeah.
The moment I saw a skillless, I was very, very worried it was going to be a Janemba chain. So I ended up keeping a King Vegeta's. I think in my in the early game, I found a King Vegeta's Imposing Presence, and then I just kind of kept my energy open.
Yeah.
But then eventually, it was kind of a weird mix, and he didn't end up actually having Janemba at all. He also had some generic good stuff of Galactic Buster and Bojack's crew, which every single blue deck seems to be playing
it's such lately. A good engine.
Oh yeah, I feel a little sorry for Bojack himself. The Bojack leader finally gets a good engine, and it gets played in every single blue deck except Bojack. Yeah, but in the early game, I ended up going first. I played an SSG Vegeta. On his turn, he charged an energy, swung, drew a card, didn't end up doing anything. And then I got to pull off, I mentioned this before, but I got to pull off the 29k double strike crit against a 5k leader. He didn't want to give away 5 cards to deal with it, obviously, so he took it, and I kind of just dropped Bardock and then proceeded to aggro him very, very hard. I didn't ended up awakening that turn, left my energy open with a King Vegeta's Imposing Presence. On his next turn, he awakened to refill some cards in hand, swung, and then left all of his energy up. I went for a Broly Crown. I don't remember what was in his hand, but it's when I started seeing that he had some Bojack's crew in there. Didn't get to remove that much of note, but then kind of just kept hitting him until he was forced to tap out, and then proceeded to win the game with Fighting Against Fate. Or rather, I played Fighting Against Fate, he was tapped out and was on 1 life, and decided that, yeah, there wasn't anything he could do against it. And, yeah, but he was a nice guy. He also did pretty well on the day. It seems to be a theme with a lot of the people I ended up playing against, but, yeah. It was and then, I was pretty worried about it originally, but it was fine. But yeah, sorry.
And then last round you had Mr. Vegex himself, David Liu.
Yeah, well, I'd like to give a big shout out to Benny Zhang right now, because he also plays Vegex very, very religiously at my locals. He likes to play lots of everything, but Vegex is definitely his baby. So I have been destroyed by it enough times to fully understand what the deck is capable of. in addition to that, David, he did play quite well. However, he had a fairly unfortunate first two mills. I think on his first mill, he didn't get to play anything. And on his second mill, he got in a single time Agent Vegeta. And it wasn't until his third mill that he actually got to actually do anything. But yeah, he wasn't. I managed to get off my normal starting combo. I hit him with a critical, went into Bardock, went in switching gears, went into Tau, then proceeded to Awaken, and then just kind of left things from there. And then on the very first attack, hit him with Imposing Presence, and he couldn't really get past it. And then it was just a matter of outvaluing him until into the game, really. It was quite a grindy matchup. It was a very thoughtful matchup. A lot of decision went into our sort of final moves because we weren't entirely sure about what the other one had in hand. But yeah, even though we only, I think, had 3 turns each, it ended up going to about 50 odd minutes. But you know, that's to be expected when it's the last game of the day, and both of us had only had 1 loss, and you know, we both really wanted to remain in the final cut, obviously. But yeah, ultimately he tried to go in, but didn't quite have what was needed. And then on my next turn, went in for a leader swing. He couldn't negate, and I threw down a final Freeze's Death Ball and a double strike, and just kind of comboed with everything I had, and there wasn't enough that he could deal with it to deal with it. But yeah, he was a tough matchup, definitely. Second toughest matchup of the day, obviously, other than the one that I lost. Yeah.
Well, congratulations once again, Peter. You did a great job with King Vegeta, and not to mention, just a quick shout out, you also won your large store regionals that was in Melbourne. So this deck has done very well for you. In total, what was it, 10-1 over the 2 regionals? I think you went.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, incredible record, incredible player. Congratulations. Would you like to give any shout outs before we wrap this up?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to give a couple. Firstly, I would like to give a shout out to Planet Vegeta, the Discord server I hang out on the most, spend a lot of time on. I've had a lot of practice on there, have a lot of good friends on there, and I definitely couldn't get this far without the practice I get from them. Also from for Cardtastic, because I don't think I know a locals, which has quite the same concentration of ridiculously good players who will destroy you if you don't pay attention. And finally, I'd like to give a shout out to my wife, who puts up with me sitting at my computer for 6 odd hours to play a card game against relative strangers. So, big shout out to my wife, Serena. Thank you, sweetie.
Are you looking at her right now?
I am. She has her headphones in. She can't hear me, but that's okay. I'll show this back to her later, and she'll probably hit me, and it'll be wonderful.
Sounds lovely. Anyway, congratulations once again, Peter, and thank you everyone who's watching. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you want to see from me and what other deck profiles you would like to see. But we'll catch you guys next time. Have a good one. See ya.